Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to stick to Japan and we're going to return to a brewery that's featured on the channel a couple of times before. Now, I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the years, a few different styles, and if people were to ask me about this brewery, I would say that they're best known for their different kinds of Belgian style beers and also for using Belgian yeasts. And the beer we're going to have a look at today isn't a Belgian style. I can't remember if I actually tried this one when this can was bought. I did go and do an out and about video at this brewery's tap room, but yeah, this is one that just kind of caught my eye. It's a style that I very much enjoy, and I have to say I'm very, very curious to see what this one is going to have in store for us. So hopefully it's another good beer. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always, I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we're going to head a little bit to the north of me here in Osaka to Kyoto. Very beautiful city that I do recommend you visit if you get the chance, incidentally. But we're going to go to the Minami ward of the city, just a little bit to the southwest of the centre, and that means that we're going to have a look at yet another beer from the wonderful Kyoto Brewing Company. So this particular beer is called Easy Does It, or Sare ba Yuyu if we want to do the Japanese name. Most of the Kyoto Brewing beers have both an English name and a Japanese name, but this one comes in at 12% ABV, and this is a barley wine. So yeah, should be a really interesting one. Now, this is a can that was very kindly bought for me by Nevitt Reagan of Japanese Craft Beer Reviews. Lovely guy who has featured in a few of my videos so far, and hopefully we can get him on the channel again and film a little bit around Osaka. But yeah, he bought me this can as a little present when we went and filmed at Kyoto Brewing together. That was back in April, if I'm not mistaken, actually. So yeah, big thank you to him for making this review possible. I'll put the link to his channel in the video description below, and if you're interested in Japanese craft beer, he is the one that you should follow, because he's doing it a little bit more regularly than I am, I have to say. But yeah, let's crack on with this one then and see what it's got in store for us. So, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Kyoto Brewing Company before, and we will no doubt return to these guys at some point in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support that you give is massively appreciated, and remember, you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. So just go in there, use the little search bar, put in your hometown, state, county, province, whatever you like. If I've reviewed beers from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that though, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the Japanese playlist along with a number of other things. That's being added to quite regularly at the moment and will be for the foreseeable future. And you can of course check out the playlist of beers from other countries as well, because there's lots of really interesting stuff on the channel these days. But yeah, let's go on to my brewery notes then, and I'll tell you a wee bit about Kyoto Brewing Company once again. So Kyoto Brewing was founded back in 2015, and the three men behind this company are Chris Hange, who's from the US, Paul Speed, who's also from the US, and then Ben Falk, who's from Wales. But these guys apparently all met in Aomori when they were colleagues as English teachers in the JET program, the Japanese English teacher program. But Chris is the brewmaster, and he'd homebrewed during his time at university, which apparently replaced snowboarding as his main hobby. But Paul, on the other hand, was studying for an MBA in Japan, and he and Chris brought Ben, a long-term friend, on board and drew up the plans for the company, and they sought investors and then just built it from there. But prior to starting the company, Chris studied on a distance brewing course with the American Brewers Guild, which resulted in an apprenticeship at the Lost Abbey Brewery in San Diego over in California. And then he also spent half a year working at Shikakogen Beer, in my opinion one of the best breweries in Japan, and then he spent some time at Ushitora Brewery, who were being helped by Luc Lafontaine, who used to work for Judicile over in Quebec in Canada. But he also helped them set up their brewery along with Kaori Oshita from Mino Beer here in Osaka. So this brewery's had a lot of really interesting influences. The Lost Abbey influence is probably the one that has stuck with these guys the most, considering they're still brewing with a lot of Belgian yeasts. But they started off with a 15 US barrel brew house, and they very quickly had to increase their fermentation capacity because their beers were very, very well received. But the brewery itself can be found in the Minami ward just to the southwest of the city centre. And the building apparently started off its life as a lumber yard and then later served as a printing facility and then as a pharmaceutical manufacturer as well. I have to admit, when I actually went to visit it, I thought it had been newly built for the brewery. They've refurbished this place really well and made it very, very nice, I have to say. But they also have a tap room on site there, and it opens Fridays, Saturdays and Sundays, so you can go and try some of the beers, and I do recommend that you do that. And as of December 2023, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced about 260 different kinds of beer. They've got two main ranges. From what I understand, there's the Taiban range, which is the year-round range, and they've also got the Nakama series, which are the collaboration beers, and the other kind of limited releases as well. Like I mentioned at the start of the video, a lot of the Kyoto Brewing beers, I think pretty much all of them, have both a Japanese name and an English name, just to kind of just so the meaning of the name really gets across. As I said, the Japanese name of this beer is Sareba Yuyu, which translates into English as easy does it. So yeah, the meanings are always the same. But that is everything I can really tell you about the brewery. If you want to learn a little bit more about them, you can of course check out the brewery website. There are several articles on these guys with the Japan Beer Times as well that are worth checking out, and I probably used those to actually research the brewery. The notes that I've used here have just been updated over the years, but I think probably Japan Beer Times was where I first picked up this one. I first picked up the notes and the information on this brewery. But if you want to learn more, check out the brewery website, and as always, follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on. But yeah, let's actually go on and have a little look at the beer itself. So this one is a 350 milliliter can. The artwork on this is very similar to what you would pick up, or what you would get with any of the Kyoto Brewing beers actually, so that's kind of interesting. But you can see plain silver top on the can there. It has got a little bit of braille on it as well. I've always been very curious as to whether braille is similar or different between different languages, spoken languages and things like this. But as I said, this one is called Easy Does It. It's a barley wine. It comes in at 12% ABV. I think I forgot to mention that earlier. And the things that it said on Untappd about this beer that are interesting: this one is brewed using a mix of American and Belgian yeasts. There's 3 malts in it, which is Pilsner, Golden Promise and Vienna. So you've got a little bit of English, German and Austrian malts in there. And apparently this beer is brewed using a polygyle technique, which from what I remember, polygyle brewing is when you basically have one mash and it's made, it's used to make a very, very strong beer, and essentially I think you use the same mash, but you just, take different, you put more water through it and separate it out, so you can use the same mash to make multiple beers. That's what they used to do with the Scotch ales, of course, with the shilling beers, if we can call them that. So, interesting technique actually. So a polygyle barley wine. It didn't say much more about what they were actually doing with it from the technical side than that, but I thought that was quite interesting. So yeah, let's get this guy out into the glass then and see what it's all about. A barley wine, or I think they're calling it an American, no, they're just calling it barley wine, but a barley wine with both Belgian yeast and American yeast. So yeah, let's crack this guy open and see what it's all about. The Easy Does It, or Sareba Yuyu, as it would be in Japanese. So you can see this one. It's definitely one of the kind of lighter coloured barley wines that I've seen for sure. But before the head disappears, we can see that this one has poured with a bit over a half finger of a frothy, I would say fawn coloured head. That's faded away to just be a very kind of thin, foamy layer in the middle of the glass, but then the ring is kind of sitting around the edge there. You can see some medium-sized bubbles on the surface of the liquid, a few smaller bubbles as you go up toward the top of the head there. But yeah, you can see it's got this lovely, very kind of almost like blood orange, rich amber colour to it actually. So remember, the colour of your beer depends on a few things. One, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. Two, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrel aging that you do, or any adjuncts that you put in, will affect the colour of your beer as well. But that can vary from that can vary with barley wines, to be honest with you. A lot of the thing with barley wines is that it's mainly to do with the wort boil and what malts you're using actually. You know, barrel aging can affect it a little bit because it's a brown beer rather than a black beer, but still, as I say, this is one of the brighter barley wines I've come across. Not too much in the way of visible carbonation with this one or two big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass, and a few little ones just going up toward the bottom of the head there. The head, incidentally, is fading away to just be a very, very thin foamy layer, but if we sugar it up, you will see that it will come back, of course. But it looks very nice. A little bit of a natural haze to this beer, of course. I think this can is probably about, the can's probably about a year old. I'm pretty sure it was April that I met up with Neva. I've not seen him in a wee while actually. But has a little bit of a natural haze to it, which is nice. So yeah, a wee bit different looking barley wine, this one, but I'm sure it will be very good. So let's have a wee look at the aroma of this one and see how we go on. I don't think we need to say much else about the appearance. Let's do this. Oh yeah, this one smells really quite different to what you'd normally expect of the style. And yeah, of course, you're seeing all the Paw Patrol toys and all the little IKEA kitchen and stuff behind me. This is the little guy's playroom behind me at the moment. So aroma wise, this is really quite interesting. It does smell like some kind of big Belgian beer, first and foremost. It's just kind of weird to place it really. This would be one of these beers where you would smell and you'd probably be really kind of struggling to figure out what style it was, because it is just quite unique in that sense. Because it has it. If you're going to look at it from the barley wine perspective, it's definitely more of an English barley wine. And for me, the main differences between the English barley wine and the English barley wine and the American barley wine. The American ones tend to be a little bit more kind of oily, and the red fruits are a bit more sort of juicy, whereas the English ones tend to be a bit more kind of toasty and also a little bit more dry and fruity in their composition, if you like. So yeah, the character that you get out of this one is really interesting. For me, lots of kind of sweeter brown sugar, but you've got this underlying Belgian yeast sort of thing. Good little bit of like candied fruit as well, and yeah, just a big booziness. So let's just break this down and actually describe it for you properly. We're just looking at it from a very kind of, for the most part, yeah, we're just looking at it from a very standoffish perspective at the moment. But yeah, for me, the backbone of this beer, absolutely, you've got a little bit of a, I would say you've got a little bit of a kind of, fresh white bready bread crust backbone to it. There's a little bit of woodiness coming out of this one too. Yeah, a little bit of woodiness in the base, Jacob's cream cracker. You've got a lot of white bread to this one, but the bread, as I say, it has a little bit of that almost, that clovey, sort of clovey spicy thing that you often get with lighter Belgian beers. It reminds me a little bit of some of the kind of red beers that you can get from Belgium, actually. When I think about it, Castile Rouge is one. Yeah, it's got a little bit of that kind of vibe coming out of it. So yeah, as I say, a little bit of brown bread in there as well, like a sweet kind of wholemeal brown bread. A lot of brown sugar on top of that. There's a little bit of like a toasty caramel. You're definitely getting a little bit of that kind of Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotch coming out of this one too. yeah, sweet caramel in the middle, absolutely. This beer is not really kind of giving you the treacle molasses sort of things. And as I was kind of, I don't think I said it outright, but one of the things with barley wines, of course, is that, you know, to change, to kind of make the flavour a bit more complex, you can give these a longer wort boil. And when you do that, when you do that, you're, oh, it's raining outside, just realised. Your longer wort boil is going to caramelise the sugars more and give you a lot kind of smoother and more complex flavour. You're going to get a little bit more leatheriness and nuttiness out of it. You can tell that that's not been the case with this one because the colour isn't that dark, and you can also smell it with the brown sugars as well. So yeah, the brown sugars are very bright in this one. You get an almost kind of fudgy or toffee thing out of it the more that you smell of it. But yeah, there's maybe a very slight hint of nuttiness and kind of almost like a slight cakiness coming out of this beer as well, like brandy soaked wholemeal brown bread. Yeah. So yeah, aroma wise, this is really nice from the malty and yeasty perspective actually. But yeah, on the hoppy side of things, it's interesting. Now, the barley wine is of course the big brother of the double IPA, the pale ale IPA, double IPA, barley wine. These beer styles are all related to each other through their hop to malt ratios. The triple IPA and the quadruple IPA, from what I understand, take the double IPA ratio, hop to malt ratio, and just they take that and they just put more malt in and give you more alcohol basically. Whereas the barley wine has a different ratio. But yeah, these, depending on how fresh you drink them, and I always think you should give a barley wine at least 6 months in the bottle to just kind of mellow out. A year or 2 years is usually the best, sometimes 3 years. Giving these beers a little bit of time just to mellow out is always a good thing. But you always still get a little bit of green component out of it. With this one, you're getting a little bit of earthiness for sure. There's a wee bit of like a kind of smoother herbal kind of thing, but the green component is quite, it's not too aggressive in this one. I'd be very curious to know what hops they actually used in this beer. I'm guessing it will be American. Maybe. It could be a little bit of just like Cascade or something like that. Because it doesn't smell overly red and fruity. This one actually comes across as more dry fruity, but yeah, there's a little bit of earthiness in there, a little bit of herbal character, some nice floral notes, good little bit of grassiness as well. So yeah, nice little bit of grassiness in there, a nice little bit of herbal character, and yeah, the way that goes together, I think, is really nice. It's very, very interesting stuff. So yeah, on the fruity side, I think on the green component we don't really need to say much else about it, but on the fruity side of things is where it gets really interesting, because you do have a little touch of that almost very slightly banana-y sort of thing that you get from like a Hefeweizen or a kind of saison. You can smell a little bit of that in here. There's a wee touch of like banana bread to this beer. But yeah, lots of oily pear, lots of sultana. Yeah, oily pear, sultanas. Maybe a little bit like fresh green apple or something too. Dates. Yeah, aroma-wise, this is really quite unusual and quite interesting. As I say, this is one of these beers. It did say in the description. That's one of the things I would say that Kyoto do. They should maybe put a little bit of English in their label descriptions as well. But when I put it through the translate, it was saying like, yeah, this is a barley wine like no other. And from the aroma, I can say that that's true. So yeah, be aware of that. But yeah, as I always say, take a little bit of time to enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into it. But I think it is about time that we taste this one and see what it's all about. So yeah, this is the Easy Does It barley wine, or Sareba Yuyu, if we're going to give it its Japanese name. Let's do this. Let's see what this one's all about. 12% barley wine with a Belgian and American yeast in it, from Kyoto Brewing in Minami Ward, up in Kyoto. Slange, Skål, cheers, Kampai, a big shout out to Neva of Japanese Craft Beer Reviews. So let's do this. Yeah. It's really nice, this. It's, as I say, it's very, very unique. It does, you can really feel that cross between it being like an English barley wine, like it has a little bit more of the kind of toasty dryness, if you like, and the dry fruity character of an English barley wine, but there is that kind of underlying Belgian character, and probably the closest thing to that you could describe this to, or you could compare it to on the Belgian side. It's almost like somewhere between like Castile Rouge and maybe a little bit of like Leffe Blonde. It's kind of somewhere in the middle of these two, the yeasty character and the malty side of things. It's a really interesting beer, and it's quite cool to have a kind of Belgian focused brewery here in Japan, because the Belgian beers, Belgian and German beers, are actually pretty popular out here. But that's good. I'll say this one. This, if you do come across a can of this, give it a go, because it's something quite unique, and you're not going. Yeah, I've not had in nearly 4,000 reviews now. I've not had a barley wine quite like this one. So yeah, this is definitely something cool that you need to try for yourself. It's just a nice sipper as well. But yeah, really interesting stuff this. Let's try and break this down and describe the flavour for you a little bit more in depth. So we'll start on the middle third of the palate, as we always do. So, middle third of the palate, you can feel the backbone of the beer. It's like a lovely kind of fresh, white bready bread crust. Yeah, lovely kind of fresh, white bready bread crust in there. That's forming the backbone of the beer. So yeah, fresh, white bready bread crust in there. As you move further forward on that middle third of your palate, there was a little bit of kind of woodiness in there, which was great. Yeah, so yeah, brown bready base, white bready bread crust base, little bit of woodiness in there at the front. Then you've got a wee bit of like a kind of Jacob's cream cracker just sitting on top of that, which is great. I really do like that. The backbone of this one, that whole vibe there just kind of lingers into the aftertaste, and above that you're getting a wee bit of this like sweet kind of wholemeal brown bread. There's a layer above that, then you start to get the white bready character pushing its way out too. Yeah, this is pretty damn solid actually. I really like this one. Yeah, for me, the way that the layers come out in this is really nice, and within the bread, within the two bready layers I've just talked about, you just have a little bit of this kind of like grainy, spicy sort of thing, which is interesting, and that's obviously a product of it's probably a product of the Belgian yeast and maybe a little bit of the malts, but the sweetness of the bread I think is probably coming from the Golden Promise. Golden Promise is quite a popular malt to use in New England IPAs these days. A lot of breweries use it to give you a little bit of that kind of butterscotchy, biscuity character, but equally the Vienna malt is probably the one that's responsible for the kind of brown bready characters in this one. Vienna malt's lovely. I love my Vienna lagers, and the Vienna malt, can give you a little bit of the graininess as well. In my experience, when you actually try a Vienna brewed Vienna lager, you'll notice that that graininess and the dryness of the beer is actually fairly prominent in the flavour. So I'm wondering if that's what's going on with the malt base here, but you know, irregardless, it's me kind of over analysing the beer, but it's very, very nice. So above the bready layers then, that's when you start to get the brown sugar. So the first layer, in that middle third of the palate, the brown sugary layer, you can feel like a toasty, sweet caramel honeycomb sort of thing, which I think is great. Yeah, tasty, kind of sweet, caramelly honeycomb. And yeah, that tasty kind of sweet caramel honeycomb kind of lingers there into the aftertaste too. But then you've got a little circle in the middle of your palate where you're getting all the boozy notes. So you've got that more, you have got a little bit of a kind of caramelized brown sugar in there. So you get a little touch of like that leathery caramelized brown sugar out of this one. And that gives you a wee bit of dryness into the aftertaste. But then yeah, the dead center of your palate is, this really boozy, yeah, it's this really kind of boozy, oily, brown sugary sort of thing, and I really do like how that pieces together. It's great. Yeah, it's the booziness on this one, kind of, you can feel like it's 12%, and obviously you're going to notice that, but that's what you want from a barley wine. You want it to have that kind of warming effect. You're absolutely getting that a little bit in the chest, and you can feel just that wee bit of booziness in the middle of your palate too. So you've got that really boozy, oily note. You've got a kind of sweeter, slightly caramelized, caramelly note under it, but still quite a bright brown sugary note. Then the leathery layer, then the biscuit. I think that kind of describes the brown sugary side of things as well. So that's the middle third of the palate done. I would also say you get a little bit of a kind of nutty character. There's a little bit of a very slight nuttiness coming out of this one into the aftertaste. But yeah, it's quite mild compared to the other stuff that's going on in the beer. So let's move to the back third of the palate. And the back third of the palate is quite interesting in this one because that's where you get the most of the yeasty character, and this is quite a yeasty barley wine. So the border region between middle and back third of your palate, you can feel in the base you've got an almost very slightly like, it's almost very slightly cakey, and it's like a brandy soaked cake. Then you get the brown bready layer, then you get the white bready layer there, so you can feel that build up in the border region. But the base of that back third of the palate is the base of the back third of the palate. You've got the nice kind of fresh white bready bread crust in there. Yeah, so you've got the fresh white bready bread crust in there. On top of that, you get the brown bready character as well. So you can feel that kind of brown bready note in there. And again, it's a little bit drier. It's a little bit more grainy. That's quite often what you get on the back third of the palate. The flavours are similar, but they're usually lighter and more airy. And they also give you a wee bit of that. Yeah, they also give you a wee bit of that. Kind of lightness, if you like. They just give you a little bit of that more kind of dry, grainy character. So yeah, you've got that. Above that, you have you can feel the kind of brown bready layer, which is a little bit lighter and more airy, and then you get the white bready layer, which again is lighter and more airy, and you're getting a wee bit of this more kind of grainy, almost very slightly peppery, spicy note coming out of the beer from that. But then above everything else, you can feel the kind of drier, a little bit of a drier brown sugar sitting on top of that. So you can feel like a kind of almost very dry butter candy, butterscotchy thing just creeping over the top of that back third of the palate there. And then above everything else, you start to get the yeasty side of this beer. So the yeasty notes in the beer, it's like a very dense, sweet brown bread, almost kind of soaked in like Werther's Original or something like this. So yeah, definitely a little bit of that going on in this one. So you can feel really dense, kind of sweet brown bread, a little bit of kind of honeycomb and Wardlow's original wrapped around it, then just a wee bit of an almost like peppery spice, and definitely back third of the palate you can feel the flavour is taller. Then as you come further forward into the middle third of your palate, it just kind of condenses down and squashes together. So yeah, the way that that goes together, I think, is really quite nice. The malty yeasty side of this beer is really interesting, and as I say, it's kind of a cross between an English barley wine on one hand, and then you've got a bit of the Belgian influences kind of somewhere between like Leffe Blonde and Castile Rouge or something like that. A little bit, you know, it actually reminds me of the Delirium beers a little bit as well, in fairness. So yeah, on the hoppy side of things then, back corners of the palate, you've got a little bit of earthiness there. Then as you move further forward, there's a bit of herbal character, and as you push further forward along the sides of the palate, you get a little bit more floral aromaticity, and round the front curve of the tongue, it's a little bit lighter and more grassy as well. So yeah, the way that that goes together is really very, very nice. Yeah, obviously the longer that you keep this beer, the more the hops would drop out of it, and it would mellow out even further, but as it stands, the hoppy character is really quite nice. So yeah, on the fruity side of things then, I think that we'll look at that just to round off the review. So front third of your palate. So yeah, for me, the front part of your palate, I think on that border region between front and middle third of your palate, you get the kind of cakey notes underneath, that sort of that cakey kind of brandy soaked spongy thing that I was talking about earlier, the sweeter brown bread, then the white bread on top, and the base of that front third of your palate, you've got the fresh white bready bread crust, the sweeter brown bread, the white bread, then above that you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters kind of roll their way out of the beer. Yeah, the fruity side of this beer is really quite nice. Yeah, the fruity side of this beer is it's quite, it really is leaning more toward that kind of peary appley sort of thing. So yeah, at the back of that front third of your palate, you do get a little bit of a kind of sultana, you know, dry white green grapey sort of notes. As you move further forward, it's got a little bit more of a kind of datey type quality underneath, then little bit of oily pear, and as you reach the front of that kind of as you reach the kind of front tip of your tongue, you are getting a little touch of a more kind of appley, yeah, kind of fresh green apple sort of note out of this. It's almost got a tiny little bit of spice to it as well. So yeah, flavour profile wise, this beer is really interesting, and in terms of a barley wine, very, very quirky actually. It's not a typical example of the style, I would say. So keep that in mind when you try this one. It's really interesting, an unusual take on the style. So yeah, I think that concludes what we need to say about the flavour. Let's just round off with a wee look at the mouthfeel. So for me, this beer, it's kind of top end of mid-bodied, bottom end of full-bodied, probably bottom end of full-bodied is a better way to describe it. As you often get with Japanese beers, it feels very, very clean. You know, the water quality over here is pretty damn impressive. It's volcanic island, what you expect. So yeah, it's very, very clean. You do have a little bit of carbonation to this one, which is quite interesting, and that helps bring out some of the kind of spicy aspects that I was talking about with the yeast. At 12% ABV, this beer definitely has the warming effect. You can feel it coming up from the chest, and you get the booziness in the mouth too, which is very nice. You want that from a barley wine, especially one that's being as bold as being 12%. And as we said earlier, the IBU in this beer, it's a little bit hard to place. I mean, it's maybe about 30. I don't know if it's even 30, it's probably about 25, something like that. You do get a little bit of hop out of this beer into the aftertaste. Obviously, the longer you age this can, the less apparent that's going to be. But the malt base, as we said, there's a bit of graininess and dryness underneath. You've got a nice kind of smoothness in the middle, a dry sweetness on top of that, and yeah, you've also got that little touch of kind of spiciness coming out of the beer too, so you get a wee bit of the dryness. There's quite a bit of dryness out of this beer into the aftertaste. The fruity side of the beer is nice and oily, nice and bright. It has a good little bit of sweetness to it, and yeah, I certainly like how all of that just kind of pieces together. So it gets a big thumbs up from me, this one. Yeah, really interesting stuff, I have to say. And not surprised when it comes to Kyoto Brewing. These guys are doing some very, very quirky and unusual beers. So yeah, let's leave it at that for this one. This was the Sare ba Yuyu, or Easy Does It in English, a 12% barley wine using an American and a Belgian yeast both, and then 3 different kinds of malt. So really quirky beer, but a very, very nice sipper, and definitely worth trying should you come across it. So yeah, once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Kyoto Brewing as well, and do keep the Japanese beer recommendations coming in. Make sure you check out my friend Nevitt over at Japanese Craft Beer Reviews. This can was very kindly given to me by him, and yeah, I think that's everything we need to say. So until the next time, Slàinte, Skål, cheers, Kampai, and I will see you guys in another review. We do have another interesting beer to look at from Kyoto Brewing very, very soon too, so you'll see that later. Ciao just now.